So this morning I want to talk about uh, teaching evaluations. I don't even know what I want to say about them. They've come up in my life again. They always do, every semester. Um, but I think they're on my mind right now because I've reached that point in my teaching portfolio where I'm expected to describe how students have evaluated my work and how I've responded to their feedback. And man, that's hard stuff. And it's made more difficult by technology, it's made more difficult by changing expectations, and fundamentally the entire construct is flawed. Years ago, my grandfather and I had a conversation about this actually because I was frustrated. I was just starting my teaching career. I had gotten conflicting feedback from students. Some really liked some things I did, some really didn't like what I did. And oftentimes they were the very same thing. And so I asked him, how did you as a minister deal with feedback? And he said, you never really do. He said, oftentimes, in fact, most of the time, if you're in the public sector, the feedback you get is at exactly the wrong time. It's usually immediately after the fact. So, for instance, for him, most of the time when he would get feedback on, say, a sermon or a lesson that he had taught was immediately after giving that lesson. And that said something about how engaged his congregation was at the time. It, said something about, how they appreciated and the rapport he established. But, whatever lessons he was imparting were only going to be implemented down the road, maybe a week from then, maybe, a month, a year, 5 years down the road. That's when he really needed to get the feedback. That's when that's what he was really trying for, was to help people's lives down the road, not immediately after Sunday service. So I've taken that to heart, and really for me, most of the time, I try not to believe the best or the worst of what people say, because when they give me their feedback is immediately after the class. It's great. I love that feedback. It's useful in so many ways, but it's also so imperfect, so fraught with various issues. And so it's back in my life again. Here we are, back with student evaluations. When I was teaching in the biochemistry department years and years ago, we had very regular feedback that we were given. Each semester was exactly the same questions, administered in exactly the same way, and it gave some sense of continuity between the semesters, and it gave some sense that I was actually seeing the needle move in various meaningful ways. Probably wasn't, but at least had that appearance, and was some utility in that. I could sit there and say, okay, well, students found certain material confusing this semester. Here's some things I did to change that, and next semester they didn't find it so confusing. It's useful feedback. It's gratifying, but it is also a bit of a false projection of what's going on. So one of the things that has been really frustrating for me is, since coming back to A&M after leaving for graduate school for a while, was that the college I'm in now has never had consistent student evaluation forms. They've been all over the map. They have different scales, different questions. Oftentimes, my students have been given a generic evaluation form that is completely irrelevant. I teach writing intensive courses that have no exams, and they'd be getting, students would be getting questions about, were the exams fair? How was the laboratory experience? Things that were completely and totally nonsensical. And those got folded into the summary statistics. So the summary statistics, as imperfect as they are in the best of circumstances, were completely polluted from one semester to the next. Heck, even in some semesters, I would have two different sections of the same class given different questions. So it's been a complete mess. And yet, here I am with a teaching portfolio, having to try to say, how do I respond to student feedback? And what was imperfect before has become impossible now in any sort of ordered sense. And I'll be honest, I've been pretty bitter about that. In a lot of cases, I've been upset. It's like, wait a minute, this is feedback that is useful. This is something that's important to my advancement in my career, and you're giving me tools that are completely imperfect, and then asking me to use this as an artifact of my success as a teacher. And yeah, that's a problem. That's a big problem. But I guess what I realized this morning as I was working on my teaching portfolio is that I'm actually a bit more at peace with the imperfection of it all, with the complete inadequacy of it all. And in some ways, I'm actually grateful to it, because as imperfect as I knew it always was, as much as I never tried to believe the best or the worst of the feedback that students were giving me, as I always believed that truth was somewhere in the middle, the fact that it was consistent from semester to semester allowed me to pretend that it was all okay. You know, that it was imperfect, but it was still a useful tool, that it was the best that we could do, you name it. And I guess, you know, that was okay. But really, there are fundamental problems with student evaluations that go far beyond the logistics of, you know, my college and its implementation of student feedback or student evaluation forms. And that is that students are humans, and humans come with all sorts of preconceived notions, and they come with their own hidden biases, things that may not even be apparent to them. And so it's not at all a secret, for instance, that women and professors of color get graded or get evaluated by their students more harshly than professors like me. So, you know, here we are again, using this as a tool to, excuse me, we're using this as a tool, as this all-important metric that is part of tenure and promotion, that is supposed to serve as some indication of our accountability to students and our mission as educators. And believe me, I'm all for being accountable. I am all for getting useful feedback, because I genuinely try to improve my classes every time I teach them. I never leave a class alone. Some people call me mad about that, but to me it's important to constantly improve, and the things that I'm doing now are only because of the feedback I've gotten, the failures I had in the past, and you know, the helpful suggestions of the people I was trying to reach. So I value student feedback more than I can express. But there's a fundamental problem with the system that is being put in place to evaluate tenure and promotion when there's systemic bias in the system itself. It tries to put a metric on something that's ineffable, and that gives a false sense of precision to the feedback. Is there really a significant difference between, you know, a semester in which on one particular, you know, metric I get a 4.2 and the next semester I get a 4.5? It makes it seem like I've improved. Go me. But the fact is, that's not really that big of a change in the needle. And it may not even be something that's all that terribly important in the first place. So we need a better way to handle student feedback. For me, the most useful information I get are the written feedback from students. I pore over those comments, I highlight those things that I think need attention for good or for bad, and I try to respond to them. But until recently, I haven't really had a mechanism in place for doing that in any sort of systematic way, and certainly not a way that's legible to anybody outside my own head. And so, I don't know, I haven't really gone anywhere with this other than just to highlight the problems, but also to really suggest that what we're doing is absolutely daft. And we need a better way forward. We need something that is not giving us a false sense of precision, isn't giving us a false sense of confidence in our ability to compare one professor's performance from one semester to the next, or even comparing different professors in different classes and their effectiveness as teachers. There's got to be a better way for that.